This is Kevin. You've seen him on the channel before, but he's the founder of a protocol called Ooga Booga, and that's one of the leading applications on Berachain at the moment. It's going to be going live pretty soon, and I'm going to ask him some questions that I think you'll enjoy. Okay. We're going to learn about what it's like to actually be a founder, Kevin.
Okay.
So you ready? You're going to get grilled today. So one of the problems that I think people struggle with when it comes to building a startup is the idea itself. So I think it's interesting to learn about your experience, Kevin. Like, what did you do to figure out the idea of Ooga Booga? Like, how do you even come up with an idea to begin with? Like, what is that process even like?
Well, to be honest, I think the biggest portion of it is trying to figure out something that you find difficulty in within the trenches. Like, you need to be within the trenches of your own sort of domain first, right? And then once you're in the trenches, you automatically find sort of gaps in the market where you think they may be sort of like could have improvement or whatnot. For example, for me, it was like, hey, I want to use Berachain testnet, but I don't know where to find all the liquidity. So perfect PMF, I need someone to aggregate all the liquidity for me. And so that's where the idea of Ooga Booga came in from.
We need something good. I think we need to create yeah. We need to create a Web3 scanner.
Web3 scanner? What does that look like?
How do you even get started with building a crypto protocol? Like where do you even begin? Like, let's say you're someone who's like, maybe you've got an idea, maybe you played around with crypto for a little while, but like building something is completely different. Yeah. How does that even come around?
Social climbing.
Oh, tell me more. Come on.
Let me see if I can find the pine match, but it's all about social climbing, G. It's all about trying to find the one person who's going to bring you into the ecosystem. And once that one person credits you or gives you that credit, you'll make those introductions to 3 more people. And then from those 3 people, you can ask for 1 introduction from each of these people. And then from all of these people, you can ask for 1, 3, and it's like a network effect, right? So that's it. That's a large portion of BD as well. I feel like BD is just like social climbing.
But if we're talking more specifically about like building your own project, right? Let's say you've got an idea. Like, what do you do next? What did you do when you were building yours? Once you had the idea.
Find a co-founder. You gotta find a co-founder first, man. That's super important. I think that the dynamic for co-founding is you need to have one person that has, like, both people have to have not subliminal, but like a specific set of knowledge for both. So it's segregated into 2 dynamics, right? You have technical and you have non-technical, right? For me, like, I'm more business oriented, but I still have the technical knowledge, right? And so, for example, my co-founder and me, the dynamic is such that he's extremely technical but has business knowledge. I am extremely business knowledge wise, but I can also code and have technical knowledge, right? So then once you have that sort of balance, right, you can go out there and do whatever you need to do. I feel like that when you have 2 co-founders that are both technically oriented, like extremely on those levels, or 2 co-founders which are both extremely business oriented, then it sort of gets mixed up and then you sort of clash on decisions, right? For Ooga Booga, it's kind of like, hey, if I want to do this marketing thing and this sort of like business development decision, okay, the budget, done. Okay, there's no arguing about it. Well, there's like a discussion, but there's not much about it, you know what I mean? On the other side, if it's like a technical expense, I don't know, we pay for like a server or a cell, I'm not going to question it. It's like, hey, you know what you're doing, you do that, okay? And then we have this like clear segregation of roles, which is super important. You can't have 2 people sort of clashing on what you need to do, in my opinion. TT drivers.
Why?
They're just like, they'll drive like a 2005 TT and like they'll race around thinking they're in a Ferrari, and it's just because their car is light. That's it.
Hey, to that guy, it might actually be a Ferrari. It's got 2 exhausts. It looks pretty clean. He's kept it neat.
True.
Good for him.
True. Watch this. If I try and race him, he'll definitely race me.
No, I'm not. I don't want to die today. Kevin. That's the Ooga Booga airdrop right there. So Kevin, we talked a little bit about the idea. You know, you have these pain points in DeFi or whatever you're building on chain, and you kind of create an idea, or you think about an idea to kind of fix these problems, right? It's all about fixing problems. But like, how do you kind of get to that next stage where you kind of convince someone to join you on this battle? How do you do that?
Well, it's a good question, Raj. I think that throughout life and throughout startups and throughout crypto and throughout every single domain of an aspect of your life, it's all about pitching. You want to convince your girlfriend to go golfing? You got to pitch her, right? You want to convince me to come record in a Chinese restaurant? You got to pitch me, right? So it's all about pitching. You find like you go through 1,000 candidates and you pitch every single one of them the vision. And you're gonna say, I'm gonna pay you absolutely nothing, but here's the dream, okay? And here's the equity. And if it really is successful, this equity is gonna be worth such and such. Fucking pitch them. You'll find one gem out of probably about 1,000. But once you find that one gem, exponential growth from there on.
And how do you actually go and find, that gem? Because this is someone who could probably, if they're that good at their job, especially building something in crypto, they could probably get a job at an already established firm and a 6-figure plus salary. So like, how do you convince them that, we're going to pay you peanuts. You've got this equity, which is your dream, but like, how do you kind of convince someone or like sell them that?
That's the big question, right? How do you pitch a VC to get them to invest in you? How do you pitch an employee or potential employee to work with you, right?
Makes sense, yeah.
That's the biggest question.
Yeah.
It's unique to everyone. I think the biggest problem with people hiring Web3 is that they go straight to recruiters. Now, I'm not saying that recruiters are bad. Personally, we've made like 2 or 3 hires with recruiters already.
Yeah.
But I think that recruiters, like, you're just not going to be able to afford them. They charge, 20%, 30% of the yearly salary. Let's say you hire someone for like 150K. That's already fucking like 30 to 40K, bang, gone down the drain, right? And that is like life vest money for a startup, right? So it's absolutely a necessity for you to have that. So what you can do is you can go to like developer conferences. You can just like be online and be in that topic yourself. Hang out in like forums, hang out in Discords, and just make friends. And the easiest way is to make friends with them first, and then after that, be like, hey, do you want to work together? Because once you sort of like put them in the position of, hey, I'm more dominant and you're more submissive, in the sense of, hey, you're a colleague and I'm like your boss, kind of, the attitude kind of changes, right?
Yeah, you can't run anything in crypto with that kind of attitude.
Exactly.
I feel like everyone has to be on this level playing
Exactly.
field, whether you're like the latest hire or the founder. Like everyone should be treated fairly well, and I think the environment should be that anyone can approach anyone and anyone can ask any question. There's no stupid question, and I think that's kind of. But I feel like maybe this is just not a Web3 specific thing. I feel like this is just a general startup thing, right? You're a small group of maybe 3 to 4 to maximum maybe 10 people initially. Like you're all on this vision together. You got to stick together, right? And like you can't be having hierarchy stuff like that. I feel like that just kind of will kill you.
I agree.
You've got this idea. You've got a team around it, and you start building your MVP. You start building your initial product around it. Like, what are the kind of tools that you use to build a product in Web3 like today? You have certainly a lot of experience with this. What kind of things should a team start using to kind of get this out?
Well, really, I don't think there's any specific tools, but it's just kind of like if you want to build something, then build it. Like just build it. It's called a minimally viable product for a reason. Like for example, like Ooga Booga. It was like a fucking blank HTML fucking page with like, looked like shit. You know what I mean? It was like 2 boxes and a swap button, right?
Yeah.
But it worked.
Yeah.
So no one cares about the front end and sort of the design, but it's just like the back end functionality.
Yeah.
The focus on an MVP should be the back end functionality.
Yeah, and I think similar kind of thing on our side as well, where we developed a variety of different like ideas, but like you focus on the back end, and the front end like over time like improves itself. I think like the core functionality has to make sense first. So fine, makes sense. You focus on that first. How long does this typically take in your experience?
It really depends. It could take 1 week, it could take 2 weeks, it could take 3 months.
Depends on the sophistication.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you're a first-time developer, what would you recommend when it comes to like building your MVP as well? Any tricks or tips that you would have?
That's a really good question. So in the previous segment, I just said that the front end doesn't matter, but if you're using this MVP to go pitch and fundraise, the front end absolutely does matter. The design absolutely does matter. The back end could just like only work for one functionality, and the front end could look absolutely beautiful, and people will accredit that to the reputation of your company. So, two sides to the coin.
The two sides is really making sure like the actual core product works, but then also like having something that you can showcase to someone and sell. And like when something looks visually aesthetic, or it has core branding in place, then it's much easier to sell something on that, or sell someone on that vision, right?
Exactly.
So I think this takes us quite nicely into like the idea of fundraising, right? What is the goal of fundraising? And like, I've seen a few interesting takes, especially more recently, where I've seen protocols have massive success, especially those who didn't fundraise, bootstrap, the whole cost themselves. I mean, that itself is a challenge, and that itself requires prior success. But I think, let's say you don't have that much money, you need to fundraise, right? That's the goal of it. But I think a more interesting question is, how do you define, firstly, how much you need to fundraise, and secondly, how do you even figure out what your valuation is when you're not even, you're pre-product? Like, how do you even figure that out? And where did you come up with like your numbers from?
Well, let me address the latter part of that first. How do you figure out your valuation? If you're on a fork of something, that's easy.
Yeah.
Just look at what the current valuation is and like divide it by 4.
Yeah.
I think. So, for example, I think there's
Aave forks, compound forks, etc.
divided by 4 or divided by 5 or whatever. Multiples below that, because obviously you don't have the success yet. To address your first part of the question, which was
like figuring out like how much you need to even fundraise.
Well, I think the criteria is like 24 months of run rate, right?
24 months.
I think
right?
that's what the standard is. So don't quote me on it, but that's what we use, like 24 months of runway.
Yeah.
And like the standard is if you get down to like 10 months of runway, you should be worried, right? So you raise 24 months runway, you runway for like 14 months, and you raise again, or you do some sort of like liquidity event.
And would you say that's generally a gold standard? Because I've seen like a wide variety, like a big spectrum, where I've seen some teams raise certainly a lot more than just 2 years of runway, and I've seen teams that probably didn't raise enough as well. If we're using this 24-month as like a criteria.
Oh yeah, it's just a guideline. It's just a guideline. But I think a very good base is like 1 in 10. Like it's very standard, like 1 in 10. Like a lot of deals these days are 1 in 10. Like $1 million at a $10 million valuation essentially means you give out 10% of your tokens or 10% of equity. That's a good distinction to make, actually, the difference between a safe agreement and a soft agreement. A safe was invented by YC back in the day. It was essentially something future agreement for equity.
Yeah.
And then soft agreement was sort of a thing, something on top of that. But that's something for a future agreement for tokens.
Yeah.
But now the distinction to make is that safe doesn't actually guarantee the investor to revenue, right? Safe is just like, let's say you have an entity in the Caymans, they buy like 20% of the entity, the sort of like 20% of the equity within that entity. But what you can do is have like a side door deal for revenue. So then you essentially, what a lot of people do is, well, not a lot of people do, but the maximum sort of like, if you piece everything together, you can have safe plus potential soft plus side door deal. So essentially the safe is for equity in the company, soft is for if the project decides to issue a token, and then the side door deal is for if that investor wants revenue from the project itself as well. But I'm not a lawyer, that's how I've understood it to this day, and that's got me to where I am.
And have you needed to consult with like a legal team full time on this?
Absolutely, 100%.
And so how do you afford that before you've even raised? Or is this something that just is part of the cost of like building a protocol?
Convince your lawyer to take you in like a homeless child. That always works.
But you need a lawyer who understands like SAFT contracts as well, right? Generally, this is someone who's going to be fairly crypto native.
Absolutely.
Would you say?
Absolutely, yeah.
And again, like, how would you even find someone like that? Is it just through connections, through asking?
No.
So it really goes to show like how important it is to build your own profile, like even before you decide to kind of build something. Having connections in the space. These are all things that are just going to give you such an advantage when it comes to building anything. Whether you're a first or second or even third time founder, you know, the more connections you have, you know, the what's that quote? You know, the people around you are your net worth or something like that.
something like
I can't
that. Your
remember.
network is your net worth.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. It's so true, right?
Absolutely.
Especially in the startup world.
Absolutely. But I think a very good example of this actually is like VCs a lot of the time, like for example, I think like Paradigm's website and like maybe someone else, Sequoia's website or something, or Polychain, maybe it's Polychain. The entire website is just one email. Like their entire, like they don't have like about team, they don't have like about the investments they've made, they're just one email. hello@polychain.com or some shit like that. Now a bunch of projects probably like ping all of their like project files and the deck and everything to there. Fuck no, they don't check that, right? The first test to whether you can fundraise and start a company and make it successful is, can you get connected to this VC? If you can't even get connected to this VC, what's the point in fundraising? You can't do anything, right? If you want to fundraise from A16Z, the first challenge to get there is get connected to A16Z, right?
So yeah, it really is like a game of a game of like who you know and how quickly you can get in touch with those people.
Yeah.
So you know, really that you shouldn't go on their websites and kind of send your pitch decks there.
Fuck no, no one's looking at that.
No.
Fuck no. I've spoken to like multiple of my friends who are VCs. No one checks that email.
Yeah.
No one checks that email. No way.
And do you think that is that there on purpose
Yeah,
as a challenge, like to see if these guys can like actually do something?
definitely.
What about the actual fundraising process itself? Like, over how long do you raise for? I mean, I can certainly share my experiences with this as well, but I think it'd be great to hear, especially considering, you know, your recent success. So congrats on that. Like, yeah, you know, how did that process go in terms of like from start to finish when it comes to raising?
Well, I'll walk you through it. It's a very standard approach that everyone takes. And you don't know this approach unless you've been immersed. There's no guides on this. There's this hidden sort of rule, this hidden sort of structure that you follow.
This is what you need to listen to then.
Number one, you find someone that you can trust, like an advisor or like a friend that has connections. He pings your pitch deck and a short blurb to that person. Like, hey, there's this deal. We got 1 at 10, bullet point, bullet point, bullet point, raising 1 at 10. Okay, do you want to be introed? Then your friend pulls a group between you and the investor. Now you're in a group with yourself, the investor, and the person that made the intro. The person that made the intro is then like, hey, at investor, please meet Kevin. Hey, at Kevin, please meet investor. You both have context. And then he leaves the group.
Yeah.
Right? Or he stays for a bit longer or whatever it is, doesn't matter. Then the next thing you do immediately, from my perspective, hey, at investor, great to be connected. Do you have some time to hop on a call this week?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, or 10 times out of 10, 9.95 out of 10, yes, no problem. Booked in the calendar.
And once you've got the call booked, like that is like a key component, because like you believe in your ability to sell something, right?
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
so once you've got them, you can, you know, pitch to them, and you know, if that goes well, then you can proceed from there, right?
But it's also about like momentum. You can like sort of rile them up before the call as well. So if you'd be like, we're 70% committed only, we've only got 30% left, 300k allocation, we've got to hop on a call ASAP. Even better, we're 3x oversubscribed, but my friend advises that you are super high value add, you should join our round, let's hop on a call ASAP. The FOMO's building. They hop on a call, they commit on the spot. Bosh, done.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've certainly felt that as well, like that FOMO element.
Yeah.
You know, from the team perspective.
Yeah.
Especially because once I feel like sometimes my experience is this, and once when you get like a big name on the cap table, then all of a sudden your inbox just starts filling up automatically. You don't even need to make intros; they come to you. So I personally noticed that myself with IVX. But I think it's interesting. Like this is generally the playbook. How it goes. Like how do you get introed and how do you get these connections to these people? I think again just goes to show what we said before, right? Your social capital is so important.
Exactly. But the most important part, like with fundraising, is to have momentum. If you don't have momentum, if you don't have that kinetic energy, you're going nowhere. You're raising, there's absolutely zero funds. You're not closing your round. For us, like our first round, I believe we closed it in 3 weeks. So we started and we were like, okay, let's get a few commits in. Got 3 commits in, and then 6 commits, 10 commits done, and then that's the tipping point. And everyone flooded it, right? We would like,
The biggest thing about my fundraising strategy always is I need to be on top. I need to be high pace. Book a call, book a call, book a call, book a call. Like ping them every single day. And then once they book the call, commit.
And what happens when you get intro to VCs or you speak to VCs and they are a bit lazy, they don't really respond too much? Do you just forget about them and move on to the others?
No, that's when you back channel, right? So that's another sort of like secret that's no one really talks about, right? It's kind of like you get Smokey to ping them, or you get someone else that's more influential. You ping them, oh, have you heard about this deal? And they're like, oh yeah, I just took a call with them. How did you know? And they're like, oh, I don't know.
Fine.
And then you're always in the back of their mind now because like you've got this sort of like credibility coming from this more influential person, right?
But again, it comes down to the same point, right? You need to have that social capital or the social network connections to begin with, right?
Exactly.
Otherwise, you can't do any of these strategies.
Exactly, but that's a very common problem in all aspects of life.
Yeah.
It's the cold start problem, 0 to 1.
Yeah.
So how do you do that, right? Who knows? It's the cold start problem is one of the great mysteries of life.
But I think it just comes from like you just gotta on your own offer value to the world, and someone will see it. And as soon as someone sees it, then you can just continue to build up from there. But yeah, I think this is pretty interesting. And so, to your point about kind of the momentum of raising, your first round you filled in 3 weeks. The second one, I'm assuming, is somewhat similar.
About a month, yeah.
About a month. What kind of deals are you doing with these VCs as well? Like, how do you kind of define them? Especially when it comes to vesting, cliff investing, and things like that as well.
Well, a SAFT is very simple. The basics of a SAFT consist of 4 elements. Number 1, how much is this investor buying these tokens for? What is the token price? Number 2, what is the total circulating supply or maximum total supply of the token? Number 3, what is the vesting times? Okay, is it going to be no cliff and then 5-month vest? Is it going to be 5-month cliff, 3-month vest? What is it?
How do you decide that? How do you define that? I mean, there's an industry standard, which I think is usually like some cliff, but then usually a 2 to 3 year vest. I feel like that's kind of standard. But how do you specifically define?
Well, you can always make comparisons to other projects.
Yeah.
For example, like a lot of the L1 projects are now, it's like 1 year cliff, 2 year linear vest.
Yep.
You can always compare to other DEX aggregators in my perspective. Like you could see what their vests were for their investors. But in general, the rule of thumb is that the team's vest cannot be equal or better than the investors' vest. But then the investors has to be worse. So my rule of thumb is 1.5x, right? So let's say that the investors have a 3-month cliff and 12-month vest. Okay. Then for the team, I would put 6-month cliff and 18-month vest.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So you always have to handicap yourself as a team. Otherwise, it's not attractive to investors because investors are cheating and the team is cheating at the same time. Now you got fucking like it's a cheat fest, right?
Yeah, and ultimately that's not going to end well, right? You need to align the incentives of everyone, and of course, if you are building something that is going to grow really big, especially in crypto, which it often does, you need to make sure that you're in it for the long run as well, right? You can't just be there for 2 days and just do one and move on to the next protocol, right? You have to really align everyone's incentive together. And something that I find surprising is that I feel like times that team vests are probably a little bit too low. I don't know if you've felt the same as well. But
yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, especially if you compare it to traditional markets, then 5-year vests or 7-year vests are pretty normal, right?
Agree. They're very normal.
So, yeah, I think for me anyway, that's something that I've personally thought about from time to time. Like, how are vests in their current form okay? I mean, in the current form, the industry accepts it. But I do wonder in future if this will change. This meta of like cliff and vest does change, And
we're seeing a lot of projects doing like, I don't know, like 100% on TGE, no cliff, no vest, right? Or like 50% on TGE, like aggressive unlocks just because the bull run's running up, right? So we want to make it really attractive. Not sure how that dynamic's going to play out. Could be good, could be bad. Not sure.
Yeah, I think it really depends where you are in the market cycle too, as well, right? When you're approaching the end of the cycle, I can certainly see why there are terms, because I feel like in general investors know that the cycle is coming to an end, and so they don't want to buy something at the top of the market and then hold something for the duration of the bear market. So I can understand that perspective as well. But yeah, I guess to sum it up, there's lots of factors. But I think you can use some of the industry standards that we have today to kind of figure out what works well for you.
Exactly. So we just finished parking up because one of our friends sent us a meme coin that apparently the US government put in their HTML code. Not going to shield the ticker here because obviously we don't shield tickers, but part of the founder life is apparently driving back home and stopping on the side of the road to try and buy coins to try and make profit.
I'm still thinking if I should ape this or not. The price isn't moving.
Yeah.
So it seems like, actually, Kevin, it's not looking good for you, mate. The price going down.
Fuck, no.
The price going down. It's not looking good.
My one soul.
It's not looking good, bruv.
My one soul.
I'm just trying to figure out if this is actually real or not, because
previous battle scars.
Previous battle scars, aka yesterday. This actually raises a pretty interesting question. Like, as a founder, how much time do you have to trade? Now, I mean, for me anyway, trading's like such an important part of everything that we're building.
Yeah.
Like, we have to trade. I think if we don't trade, it kind of goes against kind of what we're building.
You don't really know what you're building because like the majority, I'd say like 80%, 90% of DeFi, well, I wouldn't say use case, but current utility of DeFi is people trading and trying to make money, right? And if you aren't in the trenches yourself trying to make money, you will never be able to understand the discrepancies between what someone else might not have been in the trenches versus you being in the trenches, and what the difficulties and where the real problem relies. I feel like I described that really poorly, but hopefully that makes sense.
There's one thing that I've noticed is that I've come in contact with so many different teams, right? And I found that teams that aren't really locked into what's happening in the world of crypto and speculation, especially when it comes to what's happening on chain specifically, and that can be anything from like new novel applications or even things like the craziest meme coins or whatever. I've seen teams that have no interest and like no idea even of what's happening. When they're building, especially DeFi products, I find that it's a little bit more tricky for them to find product market fit and success.
No, it's not tricky. It's impossible. Like, it's like I don't even know how you begin to try and build something in an industry which you don't even use, right? I also think that, like, for example, like yesterday, right, the Melania launch, was it yet 2 days ago, right? And everyone was trying to like spam buy that shit on Jupiter and Solana, and nobody could get that transaction through, and nobody could even sell. Let's say you got an entry, you couldn't even sell either, right? Because the hugest problem was like chain was getting blocked up, Slippage was absolutely like destroying everyone. Basically everything was fucked on the chain, right? But the one thing that managed to like push everything through was like everyone was like changing their priority fees to go higher, everyone was switching their RPCs, everyone was using like different sort of settings within like to like push their like sort of transactions on chain, right? But I myself suffered through that, and I was like, fuck, this shit does not work, right? This is such a piss take. Like, and
then you got an idea, right?
And then I had an idea. I was like, okay,
this is where ideas come from.
Yeah, exactly. This is where the ideas come from, right? And then like I was like, okay, what will happen if Parachain gets absolutely congested, and what can Ooga Booga do to solve this, right?
But you're right. Like, if you're not gonna be in the trenches, or you're not gonna be using like those kind of applications or trying stuff out, you're not going to find those problems where your ideas will come from. Right, so in the end, Kevin and I ended up yapping about a whole range of other things, including what we're doing with the markets and all kinds of other stuff. We'll share those videos in due time. What we'll have to do is we'll have to do a part 2 kind of covering some of the more execution side of things, go to market, and then of course launching, which of course both of us are in the process of. So perhaps we'll be able to share our experience on this after we do it. We'll do a part 2, or probably even a part 3 in due time. Kevin and I will do plenty of content in due time. So I hope in this video, at least you got a good idea of what it's like to come up with the idea, the strategy around it, building your team, of course, as well as important things like raising from VCs. Hopefully you got some good value from this. It's a little bit different of the style of videos that I normally put out, but I thought it's something different and it's always good to experiment. So let us know what you think. Drop a like, drop a retweet if you're watching this on Twitter. Make sure you drop a comment as well, because I love to read some of your feedback, some of your thoughts. Good or bad, I don't mind. Let us know. And with that, we'll be back with plenty more videos in the not so distant future.